A key document in the capital raising process is a term sheet. A term sheet outlines the terms on which an investor is willing to make a financial investment in your company. The purpose of a term sheet is to ensure that both the investor and the company are in agreement in principle as to the key terms of the investment before the parties go to the time and expense of negotiating formal documents, such as a subscription agreement or a shareholders agreement. Now, either party can initiate the draft of the term sheet, but there can be some advantage in being the person to present the first draft of the term sheet. And this is because you get to present your view of the transaction, and then it puts the onus on the other party to then justify why the transaction should be done in another way and that their view of the transaction should be adopted. Now, often a sophisticated or habitual investor will have their own template term sheet, and it may contain standard terms. They may insist that you use their template term sheet, and this is because they'll say they only invest on these standard terms. Now, if an investor takes this approach, I recommend just pushing back a little bit, or at least challenging whether those standard terms are required, because they aren't always required, and you need to make sure that the terms are appropriate for your transaction. So 5 things that, as the company raising funds, you'll want to make sure in your term sheet are, firstly, the nature of the investment. So what is it that the investor is going to get for their investment? Most commonly, this will be shares, but it could be something different, like a convertible note. The next one is the price, or the amount payable for the investment. You need to be very clear on what they're paying you, for example, the price per share, and when they are paying this amount. Are they paying it all up front in one lump sum, or perhaps in tranches over time? The next one is any conditions to the investment. So an important one for actually both parties is to make sure that the investment is conditional on entry into the formal legal documents, such as the subscription agreement or the shareholder agreement. You will also need to make sure that it is very clear what terms of the term sheet are binding and what terms are not. Another term that is important to include in your term sheet are any key agreements as to the shareholders agreement. The shareholders agreement will be negotiated at a later stage in time, but it can be helpful to have these discussions now to make sure that you don't lose your investor further down the track because you're at odds on any particular term to go into the shareholders agreement. The investor will also want to include a number of things in the term sheet. So 5 things that the investor may be looking for include milestones. They may ask the company to perform certain tasks or meet certain key indicators by certain dates and insert some sort of consequence for not reaching those. For example, if they are paying their investment in tranches and a certain milestone is not met, the next tranche of investment may not be forthcoming. They may also ask for founder commitments from you. So that is a commitment that you will perhaps stay in your role in the business for a minimum period of time, or that you'll maintain a certain minimum threshold of shareholding to ensure you have some sort of skin in the game. An investor may also ask for reporting obligations, so some sort of periodic report from the company as to perhaps the financial status of the company or where you're at with your product or technology development. An investor may also ask to include a term on employee share schemes, that is, a statement as to whether there will or will not be an employee share scheme and what number of shares will be set aside in the company for employees to take up. So this brings me to my final general comment about term sheets. Generally, they are not binding on the parties. That means one party cannot compel the other party to comply with what it has agreed to do in the document. Some terms will be binding, for example, the boilerplate, the confidentiality clause, but generally they're not. However, having said that, as between the parties, they will probably consider the terms as binding, as the deal being done. And if you try to change the terms of the deal further down the line, this will probably be met with resistance. So I strongly recommend that before you draft your term sheet, and definitely before you sign it, you engage a lawyer to help advise you on what those terms mean and the consequences of them for your company and the documents to be negotiated further down the line. And I say this because I have seen people take the approach that it's not a binding document. Doesn't matter, it'll do for now, we can work it out later, just get the investor to sign. And then they've found when they've come to do the formal documents that actually something wasn't quite right, and now they want to change the term, and that's ended up either with the investor walking or with the company ending up with a deal that wasn't quite what they expected.